uranium, vibranium, mithril. Ukraine is using mythological weapons and casting spells onto Russian army. Good afternoon, this is Henry Keen on UATV channel explaining hard things in easy terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. In response to Great Britain's intention to supply Ukraine with armor-piercing shells with depleted uranium for Challenger 2 tanks, Russian propaganda announced that it was a weapon with a nuclear component. Depleted uranium is a byproduct of the nuclear industry. It is neither nuclear nor radiologically dangerous material and is also widely used in non-military industries, in particular in aircraft construction. Ammunition with depleted uranium has increased armor penetration. This is a conventional weapon, not prohibited by any international agreements. Russian propaganda manipulates the lack of information of its audience, emphasizing the scary word uranium. This is completely artificial hysteria which aims to hinder plans to supply Ukraine with effective weapons. The real source of nuclear threats is Russia itself, which sees the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, threatens the West with nuclear escalation, and contributes to Iran's nuclear program. Russia also bears the main responsibility for environmental pollution, in particular extremely toxic rocket fuel. On March 21st, the UK Ministry of Defence announced that, together with the Challenger 2 tanks, it would send depleted uranium projectiles to Ukraine, which are capable of hitting heavy armoured vehicles. Listen to John Kirby, National Security Council Coordinator for Strategic Communications.
This is yet another straw man through which the Russians are driving a stake. This kind of ammunition is fairly commonplace, been in use for decades. I think what's really going on here is Russia just doesn't want Ukraine to continue to take out its tanks and render them inoperative. And if that's really the concern, if the Russians are very concerned about their tanks staying fully operational, they can just take them across the border back into Russia and take them out of Ukraine. They don't belong there in the first place. That would be my recommendation if they're concerned about threats to their tanks.
Thank you, Mr. Kirby, sir. The same was explained in the British Ministry of Defence. The representative of the department then stressed that these components has nothing to do with nuclear weapons. Russia knows about it, of course, but deliberately tries to misinform. I mean, what's to be surprised at? Russia is doing the right thing. Russia is an enemy of the West. So it uses any pretext. This time it's a word uranium. It could be any other word. Tungsten, moonstone, stadium, vibranium, green lanternanium. Breaking news, comrades. NATO soldiers are using lightsabers and casting illegal necromantic spells. We are forced to react accordingly. Look, who's talking, huh? Russian parliament members. I mean, look at them. Walking with their American iPhones, wearing Italian suits, drinking French wine, driving their German cars, hiding their stolen wealth in Switzerland while their offsprings fancy partying in Europe, snorting Colombian cocaine, these people investing trillions into killing machine that grinds human meat in Ukraine, glossy, fat, swollen from impunity. They open their mouth and howl, uranium, uranium, depleted uranium. Uranium is a heavy metal, and it must be enriched, not depleted, to be used for nuclear purposes. Depleted uranium, however, which is about 2.5 times denser than steel, is a byproduct of that enrichment. Still radioactive, yes, but at a negligently low level. James Cleverly, Britain's Foreign Secretary, told reporters on Wednesday that there was no nuclear escalation, adding the only country in the world that is talking about nuclear issues is Russia. They don't care about their own nation enough to send to another country. Why would they care about anything else? But Putin's commands did not appear to be related to environmental or health risks in any way. Of course, you can't imagine any less life-caring country than Russia in the world than this country that steals children. Because women in their own land maybe just do not want to give birth. Maybe, but Putin instead accused the West of escalating the war. And he should be happy now, because he knows precisely there is no such thing as Russian nation. There is a Russian population, and that population does not need any truth, it needs populism and fear. So Putin just does it right. He tells absolute bullshit to those who deserve it, ignorance, who like to stay that way. Putin's electorate has neither the wit nor the desire to understand that if depleted uranium shells were even slightly dangerous to health, everyone who is near the tank and the crew and maintenance personnel would be dead long ago. Because if it weren't for the war with Russians, the tanks basically do nothing but go to the training ground and return back, and the mechanics and other personnel spend about 100% of the time with the combat vehicle. And this is what the country says, where the people have become so stupidly slavish devotion to their obsolete tyrant that they are ready, attention, at their own expense, purchase air defense systems in installments. That is, these people are ready to pay fourfold monthly for gas, for water and for an air defense system on their own roof, only to continue to believe that they are a great nation and not a fascist gang of brutes of all ranks, who, like all fascists ever did, used sacrosanct motives, God, holy goals, and any kind of sacred truth to justify murder, theft, treacherous ideology, and crimes against humanity. Well, what can I say? Russians. If I had a world of my own, everything would be nonsense. Nothing would be what it is, because everything would be what it isn't. And contrary-wise, what is, it wouldn't be. And what it wouldn't be, it would, you see? It was Lewis Carroll, of course, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, a book that oozes with beautiful absurdity. Our world also is full of absurd things just as well, not so beautiful though. Russia is set to preside over the United Nations Security Council in April. Again, for those of you who didn't understand it, right, that will be including me, Russia is set to preside over the United Nations Security Council in April. You just only imagine the whole world will be discussing the criminal misdeeds in Ukraine perpetrated by Russia behind the round United Nations Security Council table where Russia is presiding. The procedure by which Russia, which is waging a genocidal war against Ukraine, can hold the UN Security Council presidency is not just completely absurd. It emphasizes the critical importance of reforming the Security Council. And just by the way, Russia's last UN Security Council presidency was in, February 2022. Yes, that is right, when it launched a devastating full-scale invasion of Ukraine. I mean, Russia's President Putin has recently become the first ever head of state to be charged with war crimes, while his country keeps holding the status of a permanent member of the UN Security Council. And now he is presiding not only in Russia, but in UN Security Council? So much for security, right? It's like offering a thug to preside over a jury that judges him. Oh dear, dear Lewis Carroll, sir. We could have been an endless source of inspiration for absurdity. Russia never legally became a member of the United Nations or a permanent member of the UN Security Council. In December 1991, Russia's representatives illegally usurped the Soviet Union's seat without following a single legal procedure outlined in the UN Charter. And yet, the World Security Council is so rigid that it just cannot follow the absolute necessity and simple logics of not sitting behind the same table with a thug, let alone let him preside the council. I mean, what's next? If we sit behind that table already, let's eat what Russia cooks while being a chef. Let's approve Russia's right to annex territories as an appetizer, Black Sea as a wine, Crimea as a main course, and Russia's eternal right to terrorize the whole world as a dessert. Seriously, Russia has turned the seat of a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council into a throne of total impunity. The world is currently dealing with the repercussions of the rule violation that took place 32 years ago. If we still want to call this council a Security Council, Russia must be deprived of its status as a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council and expelled from the UN membership entirely. Ukraine seeks to work with other nations to defend the United Nations Charter and international law against Russia's destructive influence. Ukraine is repelling the Russian offensive already for almost 400 days. The Ukrainian people, who rallied in February 2022 and molded into single-minded nations, are united and holding the Russian onslaught right now. In the conditions of a full-scale war with the Russian Federation, Ukraine makes a colossal effort. This is a matter of physical survival of the country and nation, nothing else. Victory over the enemy depends on the contribution of each and every one of us, the Ukrainians. New formations are being deployed for the defense and liberation of our land, which require trained and motivated personnel. All those mobilized undergo military training, the duration of which depends on the military accounting specialty, usually from several weeks to several months to acquire one. The most trained and qualified military personnel are sent for training abroad. Partner countries provide Ukrainian soldiers with the opportunity to master foreign models of weapons and military equipment.
There is a significant ongoing effort to build up the Ukrainian military in terms of equipment, munition and training in a variety of countries in order to enable Ukraine to defend itself. The increased Ukrainian capability will allow the Ukrainian leadership to develop and execute a variety of options in the future to achieve their objectives and bring this war to a successful conclusion. Mark Milley, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the United States.
However, while the Russians advanced, they have crashed almost all of their manpower against the fortress of Bakhmut. Now they are waiting, forced to wait for our counteroffensive. The head of the Wagner group, Prigozhin, urging everyone to be ready for it. He waits for it. We are waiting for it. Very much. I don't think you can even imagine how much we're waiting for it. Only our military leadership knows when the counteroffensive will take place, of course, but we trust them. Because we saw many things. We saw Russians leaving Kiev, Chernihiv, Sumy, Kharkiv and Kherson. Now it's Donbass and Crimea's turn. The Pentagon expects a counteroffensive at the end of spring in May. Kiev has not yet decided on strategy, but US officials say there are two most likely options. The SAF could try to advance through Kherson to Crimea or move east from its northern positions and then south, cutting off the land route to Crimea. Russians drew a lot of scenarios for themselves, I bet. Both Russian soldiers themselves and many Russian experts emphasized that the Ukrainians could strike through the south of Ukraine, break through to Melitopol, cut the Russians' supply lines, cut off the whole army group that is based at the territory of Kherson, then cutting off the group that is sitting in Angoda at the ZNPP.
No matter how much equipment there is, it is impossible to advance effectively when there is so much mud everywhere. Very few passable roads. All the roads are easily cross-fired. You cannot deploy in the battle formation, but must move only in columns or otherwise. Roman Kostenko, MP of Ukraine, in an interview with NV.
I know one thing. We in Ukraine cherish human life. So our leadership protects the lives of our soldiers. The Russian methods of waves of brutal direct assaults turning soldiers into cannon fodder is not the Ukrainian way. We will outsmart the enemy with effectively planned and precisely calculated attacks and actions, rather than blunt direct forward attacks in Russian style, which we have seen many in recent months. After all, the widely announced big Russian offensive did not bring significant results to the enemy. For several months, Russian propaganda is yelling about major offensive of the Russian army in Ukraine, yet no success. According to Vadim Skibitsky, the representative of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, the bravado of the occupiers was more based on misinformation and a particular overestimation of their own capabilities. In reality, however, they faced the impossibility of conducting an offensive in several directions at the same time. Well, à la guerre comme à la guerre. The enemy's fault becomes our gain. The European Council will meet for a two-day summit in Brussels. Politicians will discuss the EU's response to Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, competitiveness in general, and the EU United Markets in particular, as well as changes in energy sector. The details of the meeting will be highlighted for you by our correspondent in Brussels, Vitaly Sizov. Hello, dear colleague, you have the word now.
Dear colleagues, the main topic is support to Ukraine. In particular, leaders think how they can provide Ukraine with 1 billion rounds of ammunition and do it in a very fast way. But of course, it's not the one topic for such huge summit, and Estonian leader revealed some details.
We have to talk about the criminalizing the circumvention of sanctions. We have to cooperate regarding this. And of course, we can also discuss the next sanctions package, but I think it's more important to get the loopholes closed. We know that Russia is earning less from the oil, 42%. We see that actually the economic sanctions, including the oil price cap, is having an effect on Russia's economy and also their ability to fuel the war machine. So we should continue with that. And I really would like to see that the G7 would agree to go on with the oil price cap. And I know that there are worries that, if the price is lowered, that it can't be raised back again by some G7 members, but if they would respect the agreement that we will lower the price when the market price comes down, I can assure you that we will respect the agreement that if the price rises, we are ready to rise that price.
Such kind of position is typical not just for Estonia. A lot of other leaders, they shared it. For instance, the High Representative of EU for Foreign Affairs, Josep Borrell, declared that he is here to support Ukraine and provide Ukraine all necessary equipment and ammunition as soon as possible.
Thank you, Vitaly. We understand that the summit just started and we are waiting for more updates as the summit is over. It was Henry Keane on UATV channel breaking hard things into easy terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. Stay safe and tune for more.